Hi, this is Bob Sorrentino from Italian Genealogy and Roots, and I'm here today with a very special guest, Dr. Joseph Scelsa, who is the president and founder of the Italian American Museum in New York City, and has also written several books on the topic of Italian heritage. So, welcome, Dr. Scelsa. It's great to have you here.
Hi, Robert. It's great to be with you today. Benvenuti.
Benvenuti. That's about all the Italian I know. So I really want to talk to you. I really want to talk to you about the museum and everything. But before we do that, what's your background? When did your parents or grandparents come to the States, and where are they from?
Well, my personal background, I was born in the Bronx, all right, but my grandparents came from Italy, of course, southern Italy, from Sicily, Calabria, and Campania around the turn of the century, actually 1900, with my grandparents on my father's side, and my grandfather on my mother's side came in 1895. They and landed up in Lower East Side of Manhattan, which of course is Little Italy, which is where the museum is located today on Mulberry Street. And from there, they spread out and they went north to parts unknown. They went so far up to the Bronx and then to Westchester and to Long Island, and that's the normal route of the Italian community experience anywhere in New York.
So they came well before my family. My family came around 1915. So they must have been on one of those early waves. Yes.
Yeah, it's a different immigration. The immigration before World War II is different than the immigration afterwards. A lot of times, as a matter of fact, and although you don't speak Italian, a lot of those individuals who came after World War II held on to their language, whereas the ones prior to World War II in the early part of the 20th century, late part of the 19th century, they gave up their language, and they gave it up for good reason. They were afraid to maintain themselves as Italians because, unfortunately, there was a tremendous amount of discrimination in this country towards Italian Americans. All over the country, a lot of lynchings, the mass lynching, of course, that took place in New Orleans in 1891, which was the reason why Italians actually associated themselves so strongly with Columbus after that.
Yeah, and I just came across a very interesting article about the padrones, and I never realized about that. I guess you maybe it was indentured servitude, but it was the article was written as if it was slavery. But basically, the Italians fell into that system didn't have a life of their own, pretty much.
No, it was pretty horrible. I mean, there were cases, a lot of cases, and they didn't talk about it very much. They suffered through it in silence to the most extent. I mean, I kind of think of it as La Miseria. When I say La Miseria, the southern Italy was really ravaged. After the unification, I mean, it was abandoned, and basically most of the people that came were the poorer class. I mean, why do rich people need to leave? They don't need to leave unless for adventure. There's the poor people that left. So they came here and they just expected that they would be dominated and they would be exploited and they would just survive. So they hung on to their families very strongly, and basically um, blocked out the outside world and just made their own lives amongst themselves because they really weren't welcome in other places. I mean, they were played in some cases, like in Croton, New York, when they built the reservoir. Richard Gambino, in his book Blood by Blood, lists the different levels that individuals were paid for the same work, laborers. And Italians were on the lowest level. So even though they worked hard, worked many hours, they were paid less than the other workers, including African Americans. Of course, they weren't called African Americans then; they were listed as Negroes. But they were there was it was they were paid less than anybody else. A lot of people don't realize that. There were a lot of places that wouldn't allow Italians to move in. And there were six areas where they just were not allowed to associate with other people. The expressions "dago, wop, and guinea," where we don't look at them or really feel the sting of them as much as we used to. In those days, being called a dago or a wop or a guinea really was like a derogatory term, very much similar to the types of terrible terms that have been applied to other ethnic groups, and was really meant to demean and to dehumanize the person, which is what it did. But we survived it. We survived it. That's the important thing.
And I think, to your point, through hard work and community and everything, and that's really interesting. And I found a lot of people that I speak to all say the same thing, including in my family. People didn't talk about Italy at all, even amongst the family. When I try to get stories out of some of my older cousins, they tell me my grandparents, they don't talk about Italy. They never talked about Italy.
Now, I'll give you the story. I'll give you the story about my wife's grandfather, who died in the 1990s. He was about 92 years old himself when he passed away. He came from a small town in Sicily called Catalica, which was near Catania. And I had just come back in 1980, I think it was, with my wife from Italy. We had been on the grand tour. We hadn't gone to the south, but it was beautiful, wonderful time. Went to Rome, went to Florence, went to Venice, and we saw all the northern delights. And I said to him, Papa, why did you never go back to Italy? I mean, it was so beautiful. He says to me, L'America, she's in my home. Well, what do you mean, Papa? Well, in Italy, I was lucky if I ate meat once a year, a little coniglio, a little rabbit, and I had an egg for Christmas. That's it. A little bit of rabbit and an egg once a year. The rest of the time, he probably ate chestnuts, castagna, all the rest of the time, grain, because they were so poor. He came here, worked as a laborer. He worked and eventually got himself a job as a porter in the post office, and had steak on Saturday night. I mean, he thought he had died and gone to heaven. I mean, this was his country. He was so proud of being in America. He was so proud of being American. And it's really a shame, all the discrimination that they endured, but they were just happy to be here, to be able to eat and to raise their families.
Uh, yeah, and my mom's family was, even when they came here, they were very, very poor. There were 9 in the family. The oldest son was left behind in Italy. He didn't come until 1950. But I remember my mom telling us stories about, just kind of like what you said. Uh, if they had meat, which was rare, they play a game. If you turned your fork a certain way, somebody could steal your meat. And I remember my aunt telling me that they would get an orange for Christmas. I mean, that was a big deal for Christmas, to have an orange in, I guess, in the 20s and the 30s. And I think one of the most fascinating things that's overlooked in this country is the way that the Italians were treated during World War II at the outbreak. Um, where my grandparents had to register as illegal aliens while they had 5 sons fighting in Europe or in the Pacific.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was a tragedy, but it was also a turning point for the Italian Americans. It was as hard because they had the choice either to remain loyal to America or to support Italy, and overwhelmingly 99.9999% supported America. They fought. They were the largest ethnic group fighting in the European theater for the American cause. So it was, they really, really, really put their shoulder to the wheel, so to speak. And after the war, of course, so many of them took advantage of the GI Bill of Rights. They bought little houses, or they went to college. And one of my good friends who started the museum in New Orleans, who's passed away, Joseph Maselli, I mean, he went on the GI Bill of Rights, and he ended up becoming an accountant, moved down to New Orleans, started a business down there, had a very successful life as a result of it. But it was really the coming of age of the Italian American. We're no longer looked down upon in the same way. Yeah, there's still some remnants of that prejudice towards Italians. There is. I mean, and anybody who thinks there's not is wrong. But there is still a, when people try to mock them or to put them down, they'll use the negative stereotypes. Just last year, I mean, Andrew Cuomo, the governor of the state of New York, was depicted on the cover of a major New York daily with his father on one side, dead, unfortunately, former Governor Mario Cuomo, his brother Chris as the Godfather family. So I mean, and that's so absurd. But like but that's the kind of stuff that still lingers on. And there are people who still believe it, and there's still people that would like to put us down. But like I said before, in spite of all of that, the struggles, we've achieved greatly. I know that you've had a wonderful career, but I think one of the proud. I mean, myself, I went to my graduate education was at Columbia University. My son's graduate education. He's an architect. He's the architect on the Italian American Museum building, as actually. He went to he went to Harvard. So and graduated first in his class. So so we've made it, but it's been through. It's not because anybody handed it to us. It's because we worked real hard to get there. And I find that that's the American story. I mean, it provides you with the opportunity, but if you don't take advantage of it or you don't utilize it, well, you're not going to get anywhere. But you have to work hard at it. It's not going to be just given to you. And I don't think it should be either, by the way. I think you should work hard for it.
We'll be right back.
Experience Italy like never before, traveling with a scheduled group or create your own bespoke tour with friends with PhilItaly.com. Pack your bags and follow Phil. That's www.philitaly.co. Yeah, no, and I agree, and that's the one thing. I mean, certainly, my dad was a hard worker, as you know. He worked for the New York Daily News, and he's he, my dad is one of the few people that I know that truly loved his job. And several times they wanted to make him a boss, and no, he wanted to be out on the street, taking photographs. Um, but not only my dad, but all of my uncles, and I was blessed to have a strong Italian family where I didn't have one dad, I had seven.
You think about that more and more as you get older. And I think about the aunts and uncles, of course, that have all gone to the great beyond. But I think about them and I feel the same way. I didn't, there was just this warm, embracing love. It was just like you just knew it. You just knew you were loved. You knew you were accepted. You just felt part of everything, and you never had to question that. It was just always, they were just always there, and that was a wonderful way to grow up. Unfortunately, I don't see that as much today anymore. There's a blessing and the curse. The blessing is that that we find the upward mobility in America, but the curse of it is that we're all so dispersed. We tend to move away, and the children are in one state or another because of their occupations or their professions. And it's not the same kind of closeness that you had before. Fortunately, through the internet, some of that's been able to be recaptured, but it's not quite the same as the personal contact. It's not like having the gravy, not the sauce, on Sundays, smelling it down the block, and as you were coming home from church, and then coming home and sticking your bread in the sauce, and grabbing it, stealing a meatball, and then before the 3 hour dinner that you couldn't stand at the time because you wanted to go out and play baseball, but now you look back at it with such loving memories, which of course I do.
Yeah, and um, yeah, we had the gravy meat. I know there's always the sauce versus gravy. We were gravy people, that's for sure. And to your point about the family, you also had the extended family with the cousins and the cousins of cousins, and then you had the poor people who weren't Italian who would come and think that the meal was only going to be 45 minutes instead of 3 hours.
I get it. I'll tell a story. I had an Irish girlfriend. God bless her. She was wonderful. She was wonderful, and I had brought her home for dinner on Sunday. So the poor thing, she sits down. She sits down to eat. First of all, my mother gave her a stuffed artichoke, which she had never had the opportunity to appreciate before. And she looked at me like in total fear. What do I do with this? And of course, I said, just follow me and we'll get through it. But then, of course, came the pasta, and also the gravy meat came with it after too. And of course, she thought that was it. That was never it. After, besides the antipasto that came before that, you also then came the roast with the 7 vegetables that came along with it, and then sitting around having dessert and coffee, and it was a 3 hour, 4 hour ordeal for sure on a Sunday afternoon. But that was what it was to be an Italian American. They appreciated, I think even more so because they had so little in Italy, food wise, when they could have so much here, they just felt so blessed. And this was the richness. I mean, that's all they really wanted was to be with their families, to have a good life. Basically, that meant being around family and having enough to eat and a good place, a nice place to live. And they were very happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my mom's mom, all she cared about was as many of the grandchildren who would show up on a Sunday. That's all she cared about. Well, and a nice meal, but she really she.
Yeah, of course, a nice meal. But yeah, and my friends who and my non who we lived in what was considered a multicultural neighborhood in that time, those days. When mostly Italians, Irish, and Jewish people. And my friends, my non-Italian friends would come over the house, and the first thing my mother would do was feed them. And I'd want to be going outside to play. I mean, like, and I say, Mom, please. And my friends, they wanted to stay and eat because they love the food, which, of course, number one fast food in America today is pizza. Of course, and everybody, and there's so many Italian restaurants, especially in New York. You just can't, it's probably, if not, I think probably the most popular cuisine in New York. But I want to talk a little bit about the museum, if you don't mind. Is that okay?
No, absolutely. In fact, I was just going to get to that. So, um, you know, when and why did you start the museum?
It's been an evolution for me. I started out in my career in 19 well in university in 1984. Prior to that, I was a New York City school teacher, and having graduated from Columbia University with my doctorate, I was offered the position as director of the Italian American Institute at the City University. I accepted the position, and I started my quest. Um, and during the course of my tenure at the university, uh, the institute grew in leaps and bounds. Went from one person, which was me, to 23 people by the time I left it. But in 1998, we hired a distinguished professor of Italian American Studies who became a good friend of mine and worked with the museum, Philip Canestraro, who's since passed away. Phil came to me one day and he says to me, Joe, I'm in my office. He's just recently hired. I'm thrilled that we finally have the first distinguished professor of Italian American Studies that's studying us here, not talking about Italy, not studying Italy, at the City University. And I said to him, he says to me, Joe, I just came off the subway, and the Irish Americans have an exhibit at the Museum of the City of New York, and we should have one for Italian Americans. I says, yeah. He says, I'm a member of the New York Historical Society because he was a historian, actually a distinguished historian, and he said, I'm going to go there and I'm going to talk to him about doing an exhibit. So I didn't want to discourage him. So I said, go ahead and go do it. So Phil goes there and he comes back and he says to me, sits down in my office and he says to me, Joe, they want to talk to you. I said, me? You're the distinguished professor. I was a professor at that point, but he was higher than me. I mean, he had more, especially in history. I'm a sociologist. And he said, they want to talk to you. I says, okay, I'll go. Let's go. We'll go talk to him. So he sets up a meeting. A week later, we go in. We sit around with the board of directors of the New York Historical Society. The chairperson at that time, president, was Betsy Gottbaum. And Phil goes through this entire hour-long presentation of how we're going to present in this exhibition everything from Columbus to Cuomo. Mario Cuomo was was governor at the time, and of course Christopher Columbus was the first European to come into North America. So everything in between we're going to present. So I'm impressed. I'm clapping. I'm thinking it's wonderful. She turns around. She goes to me and she says, "But you've got to give us $250,000 to do the exhibition." Well, she looks at me and I look at her and I said, no problem. I walk outside and Phil says to me, no problem, Joe. He says, you got that kind of money? I says, I haven't got a blankety blank idea how I'm going to raise it. But did you think I was going to tell Betsy Ratbaum that no, that I couldn't do that? Well, P.S. Through a lot of hard work and some angels, I raised the $250,000 to do the exhibition at the New York Historical Society, which was their most successful exhibition they had in years and years and years. It was 4 months from Columbus Day 1999 till February 20th, 2000, and we saw over 40,000 people. So we knew I knew I'd hit on something. People were clamoring for a permanent exhibition. Permanent exhibition is really a museum. We first approached the Historical Society about space. They didn't have the kind of space that we needed. So finally, we just couldn't. We got organized ourselves. We got chartered by the University of the State of New York as a museum. In New York State, you have to be chartered as a museum. You just can't just pick up and say I want to be a museum. You have to be chartered by the state education department. So we were chartered in 2001 as the first Italian American museum in New York, and the first Italian American museum in the United States of America. Since then, there are several others that have formulated themselves and become museums as well. One particularly in Los Angeles, which you probably know about, which is a great addition. Also, the one in New Orleans. There's one there. There's one there as well. There's one in Philadelphia, which has unfortunately been trashed during the riots that they had. And there's another one starting in Rhode Island, another one upstate New York. But we were the first. So we started the Italian American Museum. I did exhibits at the City University in a space that I was able to carve out, about 1,000 square feet. For it was small space. But I knew we needed our own home. We needed our own space. So in 2008, I was able to, with the help of my board, purchase some property on the corner of Grand and Mulberry Street, the heart of what was the once largest Little Italy in the United States. And we started the Italian American Museum within 900 square feet. But now we're moving and the building is under construction. We'll be opening up hopefully by Columbus Day 2021 with 6,500 exhibit space and another 1,000 feet for office space. So we've come a long way, but it's not just about the struggles that we talked about, and it's also about all the achievements. There are so many achievements that Italian Americans have made, and we need to be cognizant of it and understand how much we've contributed, not given, but we've contributed to this country, to the world. And I think that's what the museum is really dedicated to. And it continues today. It doesn't stop. I mean, it continues to go on. So we want to make sure that people, and it's our own people in particular, and our children's children too, whether they're, mixed ancestry or not, because today it's very likely that they're proud of their Italian ancestry as well, and know what the struggles that the early immigrants basically went through, and also the achievements that so many of them made. That's what the museum is about. And I know I sent you some pictures, but this is what the entrance of the museum is going to look like on Mulberry Street. It's going to look like next year. We're actually I'm meeting with the architects tomorrow morning down at the site. Um, well, there'll be a grand foyer when you walk in, with a 23-foot ceiling, with an atrium, which will look something like this if your guests can see it a little bit. Once you walk in the entranceway and in the back, and then to give you an idea of one of the gallery spaces, I'll show you on the second floor, very open and inviting, a space like this. Now this is a modern exhibition, but we have many antiques, and artifacts from the early immigrant experience. Everything from wine presses to wedding dresses, to the utensils that they used, to ice boxes and ice tongs, and you name it. We've got it, and that'll all be in the permanent exhibition, and then we'll have revolving exhibitions as well. Plus we have an auditorium, which will also be able to have lectures and seminars and movies to show as well on the Italian experience. So we're looking forward to it. I hope it'll be a major contribution. But I want it to be a learning tool. The best way to teach people is to entertain them. And so museums have to be entertaining and engaging. So we've hired several companies to work with us on developing the technology that's necessary in order to be able to do that. And we expect that through Lucy Creative, who's creating the permanent exhibit, and Carlson Wilker, that's doing the design work, and Opal, who's actually doing the physical structure, will have created an edifice that people will look forward to coming over and over again. So that's what we want to see. We want to see people coming back. We want to constantly keep learning more and more about this every facet, every aspect of this experience, and how it continues to go on today.
We'll be right back.
Lafayette, we are here. The French history podcast for the American public by a Frenchman. Learn all about France's fascinating history, its great characters like Charlemagne, Joan of Arc, Louis XIV, or Napoleon, but also the great events that marked France, Europe, and sometimes the whole world. Lafayette, we are here. Available wherever you get your podcast or on LafayettePodcast.com. À bientôt.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, a couple of things that I thought of while you were talking. Um, I mean, I certainly know with some of my younger cousins, or second cousins, or third cousins, they've they're Americans, and that's great, but they've lost that cultural bit, which to me is very important. Maybe it's not important to everybody, but certainly it is to me. And you would hate to see that get lost. Funny you mentioned wedding dresses. My dad's father and his brother ran a embroidery shop. I think in the 12th or 13th, 14th Street area, from the 20s to around the 50s. And I actually connected with a fourth cousin that I didn't know existed, and she had beads from my grandfather's shop that were probably close to 100 years old now, or something like that. And to your point about the past, you know, I never would have dreamed I would have held these beads that my grandfather held in his hand in Lower Manhattan, in the 20s and 30s. So really fantastic.
I can just imagine. I can feel the chills running up and down your spine as you say it, because I understand it. We have a lot of biancheria, which is what we call the needlework, in the museum as well. Many of the women actually did the work at home. I mean, this is the way Italian women beautified their homes. What they would create these lace doilies, which was crocheting, and they would put them on the armchairs and make tablecloths and bedspreads out of them. I mean, we've got some beautiful work. Even altar pieces altar cloths I have from them, and we've got so much of it. I can do an exhibition just on that, and maybe we'll have some of your relatives work in it as well when we do that one of these days. But they were noted for their skill with needles and with creating these masterpieces, which is exactly what they were. Some of the women also did homework. What they called homework wasn't schoolwork. It was homework. They would take work from the factory and work piecemeal to bring it back. It wasn't on these intricate pieces, but it was on whether they were working on a shirt or they were working on a sheet or something like that. They would take those things home and work on them, and that was another way in which they helped to support the family. So the women not only worked in the home, they also took in work so that they would be able to help support the family as well. And everybody pitched in. Very often the children pitched in too. The children helped with that as well. And they didn't, and the funny part about it is, and I look at it back now, I look at it nostalgically, but I understand the reason for it. Do you know what a truant officer is?
Yes, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Some of your listeners may not know. It's attendance officer, right? They would come around to the houses because the kids would sometimes stay home to help the mothers to do this needlework. And of course, the parents saw it as this was a good thing because they were helping the family, by supporting the family by helping them with the needlework. Of course, the city thought it was a bad thing because they weren't attending school. So they would shoo the truant officers and the attendance officers away. But that was one of the things that eventually overcome. That was mostly true of some of the first generation, but the second generation, as they quickly moved into the understanding American values, uh, grasped onto education. Today, Italian Americans have some of the highest educational rates in the country. It's above the medium education level for sure in the whole United States. So it's, we're no longer those uneducated immigrants. That's for sure.
Yeah, and it's funny that my cousin Paul, who is one of my oldest cousins, who used to live with my grandfather used to work out of his attic in Whitestone, making pieces, headpieces for the bridal gowns. And my cousin Paul said, at 12 years old, so this must have been, I don't know, 44, 45, whatever, 46. Uh, my grandfather would hand him boxes of stuff to run into Manhattan. Uh, Now, I don't think people would put their 12-year-old 12-year-old on the subway doing that kind of stuff.
No, no, I don't think you'd want to do that. That's for sure. Not anymore. But in those days, they did, and they didn't think anything of it, and that's what they did. Of course, there were tragedies that took place too. When I was doing the exhibit at the New York Historical Society, um, Phil and I were going through my relative's attic, and they had one of those steamer trunks. So we opened it up, and all the linens were in there. But in between the linens, there was a letter, and Phil found it, not me. And he found the letter, and he opened the envelope, and he opened it up, and he said, he looked at it, went like this. You know what this is, Joe? And I looked at it, and he looked at it. He says, "Yeah, I understand." I said, it was a black hand letter. You know what the black? Oh yeah. And so my cousin was there, and she said, "Oh no, you don't want to take that. That's not nice. You don't want to show that." I said the opposite. I says, "I want to show what Italian on Italian crime was, because they mostly were criminals that were preying on the Italian people with extortion letters and basically either kidnapping the children or destroying their businesses. And this did happen, and it was a blight. It was a blight on our community, and we had no one really to turn to. So it was really very very difficult because the Italians, unfortunately, really didn't speak the English language, and let's face it, the authorities weren't too supportive of helping out the Italian Americans. They were left onto their own until Giuseppe Petrosino came along, the great Italian detective. Unfortunately, he lost his life in the line of duty, but was rooting out the Black Hand in New York City. So that'll also be in the museum. We'll also have a piece about that as well as we'll about Frank Serpico, who was a modern crime fighter. We actually have his guns that he donated to the museums, which will be on display.
Yeah, and you know, the portrayal of the Black Hand and the mafia in the movies is not 100% accurate, as we know, but I I you know I certainly know of it because um, because of my dad and my cousin's line of work, and I'll tell you one quick story about my dad and the Gallo brothers. Um, they were in Brooklyn, and my dad was took pictures in Brooklyn, and he would always he was always taking pictures of Joey Gallo because Joey Gallo loved to have his picture taken. And one day, my dad was taking his picture as he came out of the courthouse in Brooklyn, and somebody was there and kept pushing the camera out of the way. And my dad went up to Joey Gallo and said, "What's going on here with this guy pushing the camera?" And he said, "Don't worry about him. He's being taken care of next week." And he was. And my dad came home and he said, "I hope I didn't have anything to do with this."
Unfortunately, there is a dark side, and that's the dark side. I mean, Joey Gallo was killed right outside Umberto's Clam Bar on the corner of Hester and Mulberry when he was shot to death. There have been and every group has every ethnic group has their negative side. This was a blight, and I think it hurt us. It hurt us a lot though, because it was a time in which media was really coming into its own. It was a time in which, Enrico Bandella was the first real movie star, which was Edward G. Robinson, who played Enrico Bandella, Little Caesar. But like from the 1930s on, the portrayal of Italians as gangsters in the movies has hurt us tremendously. And you become successful in something, and somebody thinks, I guess Rob, you got into Harvard because some Godfather got you in, right? And I went to Columbia for the same reason. I mean, like, that didn't happen. They had no no way. But like, so they would cast dispersions on your abilities as a result of these negative stereotypes. So even when you achieve something, they put you down for it. And a lot of times Italians weren't wanted in law firms or on Wall Street. That's changed now. It's changed. And it's quite different. It's quite different. But it took years and years and years to overcome that stigma. And so they hurt us quite a bit. And romanticizing them, I suppose that's better than like vilifying us. But at the same time, it's not a very good thing. I like to think of us as who we really are. The descendants of Galileo and Leonardo. People like that. And Columbus. Who is also being trashed unjustly today. And I have no problem with saying that. I have no problem whatsoever. And I'm a sociologist. I'm a professor, and I believe I won't live to see it because I'm old. I'm an old man now. But when future generations, when they get over all of this political correctness, they'll they'll judge him based upon the achievement that he made in being an incredible navigator, an incredibly learned person who was self-taught, who basically opened up the world to the world, as which is what it says on the Columbus Monument and Columbus Circle, by the way. He gave the world a world, and it's so true. Um, yes, of course, there were Native Americans who were here before, and they should be honored as well, and they should have their own monuments, absolutely. But don't trash ours. It's not right. Wouldn't do it to you. Wouldn't do it to you. You shouldn't do it to us.
No, no, I agree. So we're shooting for actually, I guess a year, just about a year from now. For anybody interested in learning more or contributing or helping out, how would they get in touch with you or the museum?
Well, as of right now, as of yesterday, actually, October 8th, we've launched our new museum website, which is not it's just dedicated to what's coming in the future. So if they want to go and they want to find more out about us and get involved, either get on our mailing list, you can go to Italian American Museum. It's all one word, ItalianAmericanMuseum.org, O-R-G. www.italianamericanmuseum.org. And by the way, for your listeners, I'm also going to be putting this advertisement by podcast on our weekly newsletter so that people know about this on Thursday. We'll send it out on the 8th. So people know about this podcast as well and how to reach you. You're doing a great job, Rob. I know it's a labor of love. I mean, it's the best paid job you've ever had, I'm sure. But I'm sure you're getting a tremendous amount out of it. And I hope we get when this virus is over, we all get a chance to be together. And I hope you come to the opening of the museum.
Oh, I'd love to. Absolutely.
I mean, it's been a life. It's been it became a life dream for me once I got started in getting into it, and I realized how necessary it is to establish your own institutions, because unless you have your own place, you don't get to tell your story yourself. I mean, if you're part of another exhibition, or it's nice, you get invited. I've been invited now with the New York Historical Society. I've been invited also to the Museum of the City of New York, with the Law Foundation in Washington, D.C. That's nice. But when you have your own place, you get to tell the story the right way, your way, our way. And that's what I want to do for all of us. And I hope it always does. And I'll do it as long as I can. And I'm sure you'll do what you're doing as long as you can as well. Yeah. So I welcome everybody to come.
Uh, no, I will. And it to your point, it is a labor of love. Everybody I speak to says the same thing, and I've learned more fascinating things about not only my heritage or my family, but what other people's stories are and how united we actually all are.
Yeah, and you can actually, and I hope we'll have a good partnership with this as you learn more about, and you have people come on. If you think there's somebody who we should know about, we can cross pollinate with each other. You can send us information, and of course I'll watch your podcast as well. But and to keep in touch, and maybe they can be part of the museum in some way as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you again. This has been great. I really appreciate your time.
Well, my pleasure. And I want to wish everybody a happy Columbus Day. Enjoy Italian Heritage and Culture Month. And don't forget, come and visit the Italian American Museum.